ॐ शुक्लां भरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करभावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। अगजानन पद्मार्कं गजाननमहर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानाम् एकदन्तमुपास्महे। श्रीमहागणपतये नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां विषजे भवरोगिणां निधये सर्वविद्यानां श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां श्रीहयग्रीवमुपास्महे। श्रीहयग्रीवमूर्तये नमः। सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। श्रीमहासरस्वत्यै नमः। उमाकोमलहस्ताब्जसम्भावितललाटकं हिरण्यकुण्डलं वन्दे कुमारं पुष्करस्वजं। வெற்றிவேல் முருகனுக்கு ஹர ஹரோஹரா. லோகவீரியம் மகாபூஜ்யம் சர்வரக்ஷாகரம் விபும் பார்வதி ஹிருதயானந்தம் சாஸ்தாரம் பிரணமாம்யகம். சுவாமியே சரணமையப்பா. வாகர்த்தாபிவ சம்பிருக்தௌ வாகர்த்த பிரதிபத்தயே जगतः पितरौ वन्दे पार्वती परमेश्वरौ। श्री पार्वती परमेश्वराभ्यां नमः। कोमलं कूजयन् वेणुं श्यामलोऽयं कुमारकः वेदवेद्यं परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। पीताम्बरं करविराजितचक्रशङ्खकौमोदकी सरसिजं करुणासमुद्रं राधासहायम् अतिसुन्दरमन्दहासं वातालयेशम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचर गुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा। कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः। कृष्णादेव समुद्भवो मम विभो कृष्णस्य दासोऽस्म्यहम्। कृष्णे भक्तिरचञ्चलास्तु भगवन् हे कृष्ण तुभ्यं नमः। श्रीगुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं नम्राणां सन्निधत्ते सततमपि पुरस्तैरणभ्यर्थितानपि अर्थान् कामानजस्रं वितरति परमानन्दसान्द्रां गतिं च। इत्थं निःशेषलभ्यो निरवधिकफलः पारिजातो हरे त्वं क्षुद्रं तं चक्रवाटी द्रुममभिलषति व्यर्थमर्त्यव्रजोऽयं। श्रीगुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं श्रीभट्टपादम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। वंशी विभूषितकरात् नवनीरदाभात् पीताम्बरात् अरुणबिम्बफलादरोष्टात् पूर्णेन्दुसुन्दरमुखात् अरविन्दनेत्रात् कृष्णात् परं किमपि तत्त्वमहं न जाने। കൈരണ്ടും കൂപ്പി ഞാൻ വീണ്ടും ഇറക്കുന്നു നീരജലോചന നിന്നോടായി. ഇതിനു മഞ്ഞനെ കുമ്പിടേണ്ട തോറു രീതിയിൽ നീ എന്നെ പാലിക്കനായി. കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ. Good morning, everyone. Okay, we'll do a quick review of two. Vijaya and Srividya, can you do half? Dasakam 2.
Okay. Dasakam 2. सूर्यस्पर्धिकिरीटम् ऊर्ध्वतिलकप्रोदभासि फालात्तरम् कारुण्याकुल कारुण्याकुलनेत्रमा माद्रहसितोल्लसां सुन्नासपुटं गण्डोदन्यमकरभकुन्दलयुगं कान्तोज्ज्वला कौस्तुभं त्वद्रूपं वनमाल्य हे हारपटल श्रीवत्सदीप्रं भजे.
The third line second, kanto jvalat kaustubham.
Kantojjvala kaustubham.
Yeah.
केयूराङ्गुत कङ्कोत्तम महारत्नागुलियां कित श्रीमद्बाहु चतुस्तक सङ्कटगदा. I think I missed the tune.
You got it. Yeah, Sankada Gada. Continue.
Sankatagada Shankari Pankeruham Kanchit Kanchana Kanchilanchitala Satpitambara Bharalambhini Alambe Vimalam Bhuja Dyutipadam Murtim Tavartichidam यत्रैलोक्यमहीयसोऽपि महितं सम्मोहनं मोहनात् कान्तं कान्तिनिदानतोऽपि मधुरं माधुर्यदूर्यादपि.
And the pause is after the nidhana topi. Adukapram pause. Okay. Second line.
Nidhana. Okay. सौन्दर्योतरोतपि सुन्दरतरं त्वद्रूपम् आश्चर्यतोऽपि आश्चर्यं भुवनेन न कस्य कुटुकं पुष्णाति विष्णो विभो.
And the fourth line, kutukam, ta, not ta, okay. Kutukam.
Kutukam.
Yeah.
तद्धाद्रङ्गमधुरात्तमकं तव वपुः सम्प्राप्य सम्पन्मयी सा देवी परमोत्सुका चिरतरं नास्ते स्वभक्तेष्वपि तेन स्याभता कष्टमाच्युत विभो त्वद्रूपमान् मानोयज्ञक प्रेमस्थैर्य यमयाद अचपलाभलात् चापल्यवार्तदो भूत्.
And the last 10 just premastairyamayat acha balabalat chapalyavartoda bhoot.
Premastairyamayat achapalabha.
Acha, not ala. Acha balabalat.
Acha palabalat chapalyavartodho bhoot.
Vartoda bhoot.
Vartoda bhoot.
Yeah.
Lakshmi's. Thank you. Lakshmi's Thavaka Ramaniyaka Hritayveyam Pareshwatireti Asminnanyadapi Pramana Maduna Vakshyami Lakshmipate Etwadhyana Gunanukirtana rasatkata hi bhakta janaha teshvesha vastiraiva daita prastava dattadara.
Yeah, you can stop here. Good. And the third line, after kirtana, rasa sakta hi bhakta janaha. Okay, I don't know, something else you said under that word.
Sakta hi bhakta janaha.
Yeah, okay. And then fourth line, after sthiraiva, there is a pause. Okay. I mean, it's a tough chapter, but I think you did good. Yeah. So it's a tough chapter. So,
I'm so sorry. Thank you.
No, you did well. It's a tough chapter. So,
yeah.
Shividya, continue pandrila.
Continue. Evam bodha manogyathana vasuta nishyanda sandohanam त्वद्रूपं परचित्रसायनमयं सेदोकरं शृण्वताम् सत्यः प्रेरयते मधिं मदयते रोमाञ्जयत्यङ्गकं व्यासिञ्चत्यभिसीद बाष्पविसरैः आनन्दमूर्च्छोद्भवैः एवं भूददया हि भक्त्यभिहितो योगः स योगद्वयात् कर्मज्ञानमयात् प्रसूतमधरो योगीश्वरैर्गीयते सौन्दर्यैकरसात्मके त्वयि खलु प्रेम प्रकर्षात्मिका भक्तिः निःश्रममेव विश्वपुरुषैः लभ्या रमावल्लभ निष्कामं नियतस्वधर्मचरणं यत्कर्मयोगापितं तद्दूरेत्यफलं यथोपनिषत् ज्ञानोपलभ्यं पुनः तत्त्वाव्यक्तदया सुदुर्गमतरं सिद्धस्य तस्मात् विभो त्वत्प्रेमोन्मग भक्तिरेव सततं स्वादीयसी श्रेयसी.
Activity in the last line, Tvat Prematmaka. I think so. You said some different word there, and then the Bhakti Reva. After that, there is a pause. Okay.
Bhakti Reva. Oh, okay. Not after Satatam.
Yeah, not after Satatam. It's after Bhakti Reva, and then Satatam Swadiyasi.
Tvat Prematmaga Bhakti Reva Satatam Swadiyasi Shreyasi. Adhyayasakaraani karmapatalani आश्चर्य निर्यन्मलाः बोधे भक्तिपदे पदेत वापि उचितधा मायान्ति किं धावता क्लिष्ट्वा दर्गपते परं धव वपुः ब्रह्माज्ञमन्ये पुनः सिद्धात्रत्वं मृते विसिन्य बहुभिः सिद्ध्यन्ति जन्मान्तरैः.
And the first line, right? It's acharya, not ashcharya. I think you said ashcharya. There's no ish there. Just acharya.
Okay, acharya.
Yeah.
Okay. Tvat bhaktistu kadhara samridhajari nirmajjanena swayam sityandi vimala prabodha padavim अक्लेशतस्तन्वदी सत्यसिद्धिघरी जयत्यै विभो सैवास्तु मे त्वत्पद प्रेम प्रौढिरसात्रधातृतरं वादालयाधीश्वर श्रीकृष्णाय परब्रह्मणे नमः.
Very good. Okay, so let's continue with the third chapter. We'll start from the 6th stanza. I think we left at 5. Sundari, you can be a student first half. Padmagaru, you can be student first half. Okay. Second half, Lata, you and Radha Garu, you can be student. Okay, so stanza 6. Bhavat bhaktis tavat pramuka madhuratvat gunarasat kimapyarudha chet akila paritapa prashamani punaschante swante Vimala paribodhodaya milan mahanandadvaitam dishati himata prartyam aparam. So we saw in the previous stanza where, Bhattacharya was comparing and saying, when I compare whatever is said in the Vedas, I kind of the corollary theorem in math, like we said, right? If I assume all of that is, whatever is said in the Vedas, what you yourself, Krishna, has said, and what Veda Vyasa has said, if devotion was not the way, that means whatever you all said is wrong, which is not correct. So devotion is the greatest way. That's kind of how he was trying to prove in the previous one. So in this stanza, he's kind of continuing on that and saying this the method of devotion, if you compare it to like medicine, right? Like antibiotics, you see, you have to take it for 10 days. So he says devotion is not like that. It's okay. You don't have to even do the full course. You can start seeing the benefits of it right even when you start. So you do it for 1 month, you'll start seeing some benefits. You start doing for 3 months, you start seeing more benefits. So it doesn't like you have to even complete the full course. And unlike the medicines in India, I always, call that out because here the medicines are very sweet. So unlike the medicines in India, it is not very sour, right? Devotion itself, the process of devotion itself is very sweet. And of course, at the end, that you will start, like we saw in that Namranam Sannidhatte, it says you will not only get what you want, you'll also get the liberation, all your sorrows will go away and everything goes away. So he says, what more is greater? There's no doubt about it that this is absolutely the right thing to follow because its process is better. And in the end also, you'll also get whatever you want and even more than that. And you don't even have to do the full course of it. So Bhavat Bhaktis Tavat Pramukha Madhura Tvat Guna Rasat, comma, Kimapya Chet. So the da that is there will break it. So put a it chet, comma. Next word starts with the a. Akhila Paritapa Prashamani. Bhavat Bhaktis Tavat Pramukha Madhura Tvat Guna Rasat, Kimapya Chet, Akhila Paritapa Prashamani.
त्वद्गुणरसात् किमप्यारूढा चेत् अखिलपरितापप्रशमनी भवद्भक्तिस्तावत् प्रमुखमधुरा त्वद्गुणरसात् किमप्यारूढा चेत् अखिलपरितापप्रशमनी
भवद्भक्तिस्तावत् प्रमुखमधुरात् तद्गुणरसात् किमप्यारूढा चेद् अखिलपरितापप्रशमनी भवद्भक्तिस्तावत् प्रमुखमधुरात् तद्गुण
Tvad TV Twadgunarasat.
Oh, त्वद्गुणरसात् किमप्यारूढा चेद् अखिलपरितापप्रशमनी
Punaschante Swante, then put a comma. Vimala Paribodhodaya, and then put a plus at the end of that line, so that Mila you have, and some books may have in the next line, so that in comes at the end of the third line. So Vimala Paribodhodaya Milan Mahananda Dvaitam Dishati, comma, Kimataha, put a F, Kimataf Prartyam Aparam. So one comma after Swante in the third line, next one after Dishati in the fourth line. Punaschante Swante Vimala Paribodhodaya Milan Mahananda Dvaitam Dishati Kimataf Prartyam Aparam.
पुनश्चान्ते स्वान्ते विमलपरिबोधोदयमिलन् महानन्दाद्वैतं दिशति किमतः प्रार्थ्यमपरम् पुनश्चान्ते स्वान्ते विमलपरिबोधोदयमिलन् महानन्दाद्वैतं दिशति किमतः प्रार्थ्यमपरम्
पुनश्चान्ते स्वान्ते विमलपरिबोधोदयमिलन् महानन्दाद्वैतं दशति किमतः पार्थ्यमपरम् पुनश्चान्ते स्वान्ते विमलपरिबोधोदयमिलन् महानन्दाद्वैतं दिशति किमतः पार्थ्यमपरम्.
The last word, Prartyam Aparam.
प्रार्थ्यमपरम्.
Stanza 7. Vidhuya kleshan me kurucharana yugmam dhritarasam bhavakshetra praptau karamapi chate pujana vidhau bhavan murtya loke nayanam atate pada tulasi parigrane granam shravanamapi te charu charite. Like we said in the previous class also, that even for us to have devotion, first step is you should have the right health to be able to do it. Otherwise, you can't do a lot of these things, right? And the beauty of Narayaneeyam is everything since it's written in first person. So whatever Bhattacharya is praying, you are also praying. So here he's saying, for me, I have proved to you that devotion is the best way. That's the only hope. There is no way out of it. But for me to have devotion, I need to have physically, I should be fit, right? Because I cannot do a lot of the things otherwise. So he's saying, please bless me so that my 2 feet that I'm having, Charana Yugmam, both of the feet I have, my feet should be good so that I can come and visit your places. Because if I cannot walk well, I cannot come and, like Radha went to Guruvayur, you have to go stand in line for hours and hours, right? So you have to, your feet should be able to withstand that. So that is the first request, is make sure my feet are strong, so I can actually go and visit your places. Second, my hands have to be good. If you're not able to do things with your hand, he says, how can I do puja to you? So karam apichate pujana vidau. So please make sure my hands are good and strong so I can perform puja to you. Next, my eyes. So we never imagine what life would be without eyes, but he says my eyes have to be good so that I can actually see your beautiful form. So when I come to the temple, I can actually see the alankarams that have been done. I can actually see your beautiful form. Next, your nose. Bless my nose so that the tulasi which is put on your feet, right, that smell is still there. So when I picked up that photo after Sampurna Narayaneeyam a day later, I don't know who got the tulasi male for that. I think Sridevi Garu or somebody had got it, I forget. It was still so fragrant, right? That fragrance remained in my puja room for 2 days, right? From the tulasi that was put. She says, please bless my nose so I can smell the tulasi that is actually put on your put in your photos. And then of course my ears. So the ears have to be good so that when people are telling about your greatness, telling about your stories and telling about all your names, I can actually hear it. So he says, bless each of these body parts, not so that I can have material enjoyment, but I can actually be more devoted to you, because that is the ultimate goal here. So vidhuya kleshan me, comma, kuru charana yugmam dhrita rasam, and then put a plus, bhavat kshetra praptau, comma, karamapichate pujana vidhau. विधूय क्लेशान् मे कुरु चरण युग्मं धृतरसं भवत्क्षेत्र प्राप्तौ करमपि च ते पूजन विधौ.
विधूय क्लेशान् मे गुरुचरणयुग्मं धृतरसं भवत्क्षेत्रप्राप्तौ करमपि च ते पूजनविधौ. विधूय क्लेशान् मे गुरुचरणयुग्मं धृतरसं भवत्क्षेत्रप्राप्तौ करमपि च ते पूजनविधौ.
विधूय क्लेशान् मे कुरु चरणयुग्मं धृतरसं भवत्क्षेत्रप्राप्तौ करमपि च ते पूजनविधौ. विधूय क्लेशान् मे कुरु चरणयुग्मं धृतरसं भवत्क्षेत्रप्राप्तौ करमपि च ते पूजनविधौ.
Bhavan murtya loke nayanam. So the ma that is there, you break it, put a im and comma, nayanam, comma. Next word starts with the a. Atha te pada tulasi, and then put a plus, parigrane granam, and then put a comma. Shravanam apite charu charite. Bhavan murtya loke nayanam atate pada tulasi parigrane granam shravanam apite charu charite.
भवन मूर्त्यालोके नयनम् अथ ते पादतुलसी परिघ्राणे घ्राणं श्रवणमपि ते चारुचरिते. भवन मूर्त्यालोके नयनम् अथ ते पादतुलसी परिघ्राणे घ्राणं श्रवणमपि ते चारुचरिते.
भवन्मूर्ते लोके नयनम् अधते पादतुलसी परिघ्राणे घ्राणं श्रवणमपि ते चारुचरिते. भवन्मूर्त्यालोके नयनम् अधते पादतुलसी परिघ्राणे घ्राणं श्रवणमपि ते चारुचरिते.
That's 8. प्रभूतादिव्याधिप्रसवचलिते मामकहृदि त्वदीयं तद्रूपं परमसुखचिद्रूपमुदीयात्. उदञ्च द्रोमाञ्चो गलितबहुहर्षाश्रुनिवहो यथा विस्मद्यासं दुर्पशमपीडा परिभवान्. Says that all the physical and mental afflictions we all have, like everybody has some challenges or the other, right? He says with all of these challenges, it is very difficult to then imagine the form of the Lord, because like we said, for pure devotion, it says it comes when you hear things, like I said earlier, right? You should have horripilation all over your body. your heart should melt and tears should flow. That is the definition according to Bhattaripada. That's when it says you are reached that point of devotion, right? Now, for that devotion to happen, if you have physical problems and mental problems, he says, Lord, then how can I imagine your form of you? How can I imagine your form in my mind? Because I'm going to have so many distractions. I cannot sit. I'll have other things going on in my mind. So he says, please eradicate all the physical and mental ailments I have, so I can imagine that form of you in my mind. And eventually, by imagining that form of you more and more in my mind, I'll be able to reach that point of devotion. Again, here it is, this whole chapter is about prayer to say, I know what a perfect devotee is. You please help me make myself the perfect devotee by removing all these challenges I have, right? So, Prabhutadi Vyadhi Prasabha Chalite Mamaka Hridi, comma, so no pause there. Twadiyam Tadrupam Parama Sukha Chidrupam Udiyat. Prabhutadhivyadhiprasabachalite mamaka hridi twadiyam tadrupam paramasuka chidrupam udiyat.
Rajesh ji, in my book it says Parama Rasa.
That's also fine. Paramasuka in the booklet, but the meaning is the same. So, you know, it's Sukha, you just change it to Sukha. So it's essentially like a full happiness. That's what it is, yeah.
प्रभूताधिव्याधिप्रसभचलिते मामकहृदि त्वदीयं तद्रूपं परमसुखचिद्रूपम् उदीयात् प्रभूताधिव्याधिप्रसभचलिते मामकहृदि त्वदीयं तद्रूपं परमसुखचिद्रूपमुदीयात्
प्रभूताधिव्याधिप्रसभचलिते मामकहृदि त्वदीयं त्वद्रूपं परमसुखचिद्रूपमुदीयात् प्रभूताधिव्याधिप्रसभचलिते मामकहृदि त्वदीयं तद्रूपं परमसुखचिद्रूपमुदीयात्.
Udanchad Romancho, if you want to break it, the dra is there. Udanchad Romancho, Galita Bahu Harshashru Nivaho, comma, Yata Vismaryasam Duru Pashama Pida Paribhavan. Udanchad Romancho, Galita Bahu Harshashru Nivaho, Yata Vismaryasam Duru Pashama Pida Paribhavan.
उदञ्चद् रोमाञ्चो गलितबहुहर्षाशुनिवहो यथा विस्मर्यासं दुरुपशमपीडा परिभवान् उदञ्चद् रोमाञ्चो गलितबहुहर्षाशुनिवहो यथा विस्मर्यासं दुरुपशमपीडा परिभवान्
उदञ्चद्रोमाञ्चो गलितबहुहर्षाश्रुनिवहो यदा विस्मर्यासं दुरुपशमपीडा परिभवान् उदञ्चाद्रोमाञ्चो गलितबहुहर्षाश्रुनिवहो यदा विस्मर्यासं दुरुपशमपीडा परिभवान्.
Stanza 9. Marudgehadhisha Tvai khalu paranchopi sukhino bhavatsnehi soham subahu paritapye chakimidam akirtiste ma bhoot baradagata bharam prashamayan bhavad bhaktottam sam jhatiti kurumam kamsadhamana. Of course, you know, one challenge all of us have as humans is we end up comparing. So Bhattaripada says, see, I know a lot of people who are not your devotees, but they don't seem to have any physical problems or mental problems and all that. But I'm so devoted to you. He says, I want to become the best of your devotees, but then you have given me so many physical problems, right? He says, it's okay. I says, because at the end of the day, all of us have different things because of the various karma we have done. I think we probably discussed it, or we'll see the different types of karma later. But he says, but the problem with it is people will think you are bad, O Krishna. So he says, you please eradicate my ailments. Otherwise, people are going to say this, but you know, whoever it is, Bhattaripada or you or me, he's always praying to the Lord, but then he's having so many physical problems. He's having so many diseases. That means the blame will come on you, O Krishna. So you eradicate all my ailments so that I can become the best of your devotees. So bad name will not come to you. But anyway, there's a continuation of this in the 10th. So we'll stop the meaning here on this. Marud Geha Dhisha, comma, Tvai Khalu paranchopi sukhino, comma, bhavat snehi soham subahu paritapye cha kimidam. Marudgehadhisha tvai khalu paranchopi sukhino bhavat snehi soham subahu paritapye cha kimidam.
मरुद्गेहाधीश त्वयि खलु पराञ्चोऽपि सुखिनो भवत् स्नेही सोऽहं सुबहु परितप्ये च किमिदम् मरुद्गेहाधीश त्वयि खलु पराञ्चोऽपि सुखिनो भवत् स्नेही सोऽहं सुबहु परितप्ये च किमिदम्
मरुद्गेहाधीश त्वयि खलु पराञ्चोऽपि सुखिनो भवस्नेही सोऽहं सुबहु परितप्ये च किमिदम् मरुद्गेहाधीश त्वयि खलु पराञ्चोऽपि सुखिनो भवत्स्नेही सोऽहं सुबहु परितप्ये च किमिदम्
Akirtiste ma bhoot. So the da that is there, you have dwa, just make it it first, bhoot, comma. Next word starts with a va. Varada gadabharam prashamayanne, comma. Bhavat bhakto tamsam jhatiti kurumam kamsadamana. Means very quickly. Jhatiti is very quickly. Please eradicate it very quickly, O slayer of Kamsa. Akirtiste ma bhoot. Varadagada prashamayenne bhavad bhaktottamsam jhatiti gurumam kamsadamana.
कीर्तिस्ते मा भूत् वरदगदभारं प्रशमयन् भवद्भक्तोत्तंसं झटिति कुरु मां कंसदमन अकीर्तिस्ते मा भूत् वरदगदभारं प्रशमयन् भवद्भक्तोत्तंसं झटिति कुरु मां कंसदमन
अकीर्तिस्थे मा भूत् वरदगदभारं प्रशमयन् भवद्भक्तोत्तंसं झटिति कुरु मां कंसदमन अकीर्तिस्थे मा भूत् वरदगदभारं प्रशमयन् भवद्भक्तोत्तंसं झटिति कुरु मां कंसदमन.
That's it. Kimuktair bhuyobih tavahi karuna yavadudiyate aham tavaddeva prahita vividhartha pralapitah purah klipte padhe varada tavanishyami divasan yata shakti vyaktam natinuti nisheva virachayan. So finally he concludes this continuation of the previous one saying, what is the use of lamenting and complaining about all of these things, right? You can keep complaining, saying, why is that person more happy than me? He's not praying. Why is he not having any problems? You can keep complaining. But he says at the end of the day, like he has said before also, he said, if devotion was not the right path, that means you, Vyasa, and whatever the Vedas have said are all completely wrong. And that is not the case. We already established that corollary. Similarly, even Parikshit, when he learned, he had 7 days left. He could have done anything he wanted, right? He could have decided, I want to take a tour of the world, but he decided no. He says, I'm going to fast all those 7 days and I'm going to hear about Srimad Bhagavatam, and then he got liberated. So there are enough proof to say that devotion is the only way. So he says, while this, I'm going to stop lamenting because there's no choice to me right now. The only choice for me is when you decide the time is right, and then you bless me, so all these afflictions of mine go away. So till that point happens, I'm going to continue praying because I don't have an alternative, right? Only if you have an alternative, you can say this option is not working, let me jump to the other option. Most cases, the devotion is the last option we anyway come to. So, this is the last resort. He says, I have nothing to do. I'm going to continue doing this. So yatha shakti, as much as I am able to do, Nati Nuti Nisheva means I'm going to be able to prostrate to you, I'm going to sing to you, I'm going to sing your praises and worship you according to my capacity. So that's how he ends up this chapter, saying I'm going to continue doing this according to my capacity. Kimuktair bhuyo bihi. So that is there, put a visarga and a comma. Tavahi karuna yavadudiyat, put it at the end of that line. Next line, the daham that you have in the next line, that becomes aham. Aham tavadeva prahita vividhartha pralapitaha. किमुक्तैर्भूयोभिः तव हि करुणा यावदुदीयात् अहं तावद्देव प्रहित विविधार्थ प्रलपितः
मुक्तैर्भूयोभिः तव हि करुणा यावत् उदीयात् अहं तावद्देव प्रहितविविधार्थप्रलपितः विमुक्तैर्भूयोभिः तव हि करुणा यावत् उदीयात् अहं तावद्देव प्रलपितः
किमुक्तैर्भूयो हि तव हि करुणा यावदुदीयात् अहं तावद्देव प्रहितविविधार्थप्रलपितः
Padma Garu,
कि-
bhuyobihi, the first word.
भूयोभिः
Kimuktairbhuyobihi.
किमुक्तैर्भूयोभिः बिः भूयोभिः అంతేనండి.
Correct, yeah.
किमुक्तैर्भूयोभिः तव करुणा तव हि करुणा यावदुदीयात् अहं तावद्देव प्रहितविविधार्थप्रलपितः
Puraha, put the ich sound in between. Purah, klipte, pade, varada, comma, tava, neshyami, divasan, ends with the in, comma. In case you have a in the next line, you can strike that off. Yata, shakti, vyaktam, nati, nuti, nisheva, virachayan. Purah, klipte, pade, varada, tava, neshyami, divasan, yata shakti vyaktam nati nuti nisheva virachayan.
Rajesh, I have a doubt. Is it just klipte or klupte?
Klipte.
Oh, clip. Okay.
It's ik. It's not a full. It's ik. Klipte. KLU. Klipte.
KLU. Okay, there's no ru.
I mean, the ru when the la when the ru comes under the la,
Right.
you cannot say ru. It doesn't break that way. Like tr. It doesn't break that way. So it becomes like klipte. L.
Klupte. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Purah klupte pade varada tava neshyami divasan yatha shakti vyaktam natinuti nisheva virachayan. Purah klupte pade varada tava neshyami divasan yatha shakti vyaktam natinuti nisheva virachayan.
पुरः क्लुप्ते पादे वरद तव नेष्यामि दिवसान् यदा शक्तिव्यक्तं नतिनुति निषेवा विरचयन् पुरः क्लुप्ते पादे वरद तव नेष्यामि दिवसान् यदा शक्तिव्यक्तं नतिनुति निषेवा विरचयन्.
Shri Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha. Okay, Dasakam 4 is very interesting and a complicated dashakam. Simple to say, but the theory of it is very complicated. So it's Ashtanga Yoga Varnanam and Yoga Siddhi Varnanam. So for any of you who do yoga, I'm going to kind of end up breaking it off because this is talking about what the right way of yoga is, Ashtanga Yoga. And then how do you attain Yoga Siddhi? How do you attain liberation through the path of yoga, right? So, of course, now the word yoga has been beaten down. People think of it as stretches, right? Or the body postures and things like that. But yoga, the root word of yoga is yuj, which is union with God. So the ultimate goal of yoga is to attain liberation. And this entire chapter is going to talk about how do you attain liberation through the path of Ashtanga Yoga, right? And so like the way this has been structured, right? So first Dashakam Bhattari talked about the greatness of the Lord who is in Guruvayur. Then in second chapter, he described about the form of the Lord who is in Guruvayur. Then third, he said what the ideal devotee should be. This chapter is saying for this ideal devotee in 3 to attain that Lord who I described in 1 through the path of yoga by imagining that Lord in Dashakam 2. That's what this is, right? So, the what do you call the disclaimer I'll put right away in the beginning of this is none of this Ashtanga yoga I do, right? Because that's very important to say that, because I'm going to preach a lot today. And when you preach, the first question people ask is, do you even do any one of those Ashtanga yoga? The answer is no, because we'll see how difficult it is, right? And the end of it, we'll all decide that we don't want to do the yoga margam. Some other margam is better for me, right? So we'll start this. So this got like 14 stanzas or something, extra stanzas here. Stanza 1. कल्यता मम कुरुष्व तावतीं कल्यते भवदुपासनं यया स्पष्टमष्टविधयोगचर्यया पुष्टया श्रुतव तुष्टिमाप्नुयाम्. So in the previous continuing of that, he said that, you give me good health, you give me good feet so I can come to your temples, and all of that we saw. So he says, the reason you have to bless me with good health is so that I can actually perform your worship the right way, because I want to attain siddhi, I want to attain liberation, and I want to attain that siddhi through the path of Ashtanga yoga. And to attain the siddhi through the path of Ashtanga yoga, and as we go through each of these, you'll realize that your body has to be so perfect that it cannot have any problems, because then you cannot do the Ashtanga yoga and attain that siddhi. So he says, you please bless me with good health so I can go through the path of Ashtanga yoga, right? So this Ashtanga yoga, there are 8 limbs of this Ashtanga, 8 limbs of this, right? And we'll cover through each of these limbs, but I'll give the summary of what those 8 are. So it is Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama. So the first 4 are kind of the foundational blocks. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama. Those are foundational blocks. Once you hit those first 4 foundational blocks, then it is Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana. Those are the next 3. If you think of it like a pyramid, right? You have 4 at the bottom, which are foundational. Then by doing this foundational 4, you can go to the next 3, which is Pratyahara, Dhyana, Dharana, Dhyana. By doing those 3, you get to the top, which is Samadhi, which is the final liberation or union, right? So that's the pyramid of this 8 limbs of these yogas, right? So here we're going to talk about what each of those limbs are. And then finally, for those of you who are interested in attaining liberation at the very end, it also tells exactly how you need to do it and what path you're going to take when your soul leaves your body, and where you're going to, what journey it will take, right, at the end of it as well. So, Kalyatam mama kurushva tavatim, long e, comma, kalyate bhavadupasanam yaya, spashtamashta vidha yoga charyaya, comma, पुष्टयाशु तव तुष्टिमाप्नुयाम्. कल्यतां मम कुरुष्व तावतीं कल्यते भवदुपासनं यया स्पष्टमष्टविधयोगचर्यया पुष्टयाशु तव तुष्टिमाप्नुयाम्.
कल्यता मम कुरुष्व तावतीं कल्यते भवदुपासनं यया स्पष्टमष्टविधयोगचर्यया पुष्टयाशु तव तुष्टिमाप्नुयाम्. कल्यता मम कुरुष्व तावतीं कल्यते भवदुपासनं यया स्पष्टमष्टविधयोगचर्यया पुष्टयाशु तव तुष्टिमाप्नुयाम्.
कल्यतां मम कुरुष्व तावतीं कल्यते भवदुपासनं यया स्पष्टमस्तविधयोगचर्यया पुष्टयाशु तव तुष्टिमाप्नुयाम्. कल्यतां मम कुरुष्व तावतीं कल्यते भवदुपासनं यया स्पष्टमस्तविधयोगचर्यया पुष्टयाशु तव तुष्टिमाप्नुयाम्.
Answer 2. Brahmacharya dhridatadibhiryamaihi आप्लवादिनियमैश्च पाविताः कुर्महे दृढममी सुखासनं पंकजाद्यमपि वा भवत्पराः. So here he is talking about the first 3 limbs of the yoga very quickly. So first the yama. So the yama, the way to think of the first limb of the yoga is how you are behaving, how your behavior impacts others, right? So the first limb, this itself has 5 categories. So for you to, and the thing with the Ashtanga yoga is you have to go through each of it in sequence. You cannot bypass 1 and go to 3 and all that. And if you fail 3, you have to then start all over again. So it's got all those rules. So the first one, yama, the first step of first 5 parts of that is, first is ahimsa. So you should completely know, you should not hurt anybody else mentally and physically, right? That's the first step. Second is, you should always speak the truth, the satyam, you should always do. Third is, no stealing anything from somebody else. Stealing automatically means you're taking it from somebody else, right? So it's an impact to somebody else. If you don't tell truth, it is at the end of the day hurting somebody else. So all of these has an impact on someone else. So it is, no violence, no ahimsa, always speaking the truth, no stealing. And then you should also maintain this cleanliness, shuddhatvam, brahmacharya. That's why it's brahmacharya. Is that process of brahmacharya you have to maintain. And the last one, very important, no acceptance of gift. You should not have any debt to anybody else, right? Because the moment somebody gifts you something, then you're obligated, right? Because now you have a karma to give them back something. So you should not have any dependence on anybody for any of that stuff. So these all, like I said, the moment you listen to this, you said, okay, first step itself, we are failed. We are not going to pass the first step, right? So yama, that is the first, all these 5 things you pass, you are now cleared the first limb of the yoga, which is the yama limb. Then the second limb of yoga is the niyama. So niyama is kind of more how you live, internal things, right? So it first starts with, shauch, it's the cleanliness, with internal and external cleanliness of it, right? Then more important, contentment with whatever you have. And then you should perform austerities, the study of the scriptures. You do all the things necessary to clean yourself internally, whatever those things are. So this, praying or reading of scriptures, worship of God, all of that helps you purify yourself. So all of those are required before you go to the next step. So that is the first 2, yama and niyama. Next, the third one, which comes is asana. So the asana is the thing where we all do this padmasana pose, that pose, everything, the body thing, because the primary purpose of that is, once you get into this dhyana state, which is going to come later, you're going to go through hours of meditation and hours of this practice, and your body should be able to do that, right? So this asana's primary purpose was to say your body should be flexible enough to be able to sustain these long hours of prayers and meditation. So that is the third one, asana, which a lot of you know all the asanas, so I'm not going to get into that. So that asana is the third one. Next, the fourth one, which is a very other foundational element, is pranayama. So we all do pranayama. A lot of people do pranayama one way or the other. It doesn't matter. There are different schools of it. But the purpose of the pranayama is going to come in the 5th one or 6th, 7th one, is control over your breath. That is the most important one. So you should reach a point where you're able to control your breath. And that's why all this pranayama, which no matter who you follow, Pandit Sri Ravi Shankar or whoever you follow, they all teach different pranayama exercise. All of that is good only. All of that, the purpose is to control your breath. So these 4, especially the first 2 is to get your house in order, right? Cleanliness, to get things in order. This asana and pranayama, you're going to see how it's going to benefit in the next one. But these 4 are the foundational 4 elements before you go to the main ones. So brahmacharya dhridatadhi bhirya maihi. So the ra that is there, you remove it, put a visarga comma. Dhridatadhi bhirya maihi, comma. Aplavadi niyamaischa pavitaha. Kurmahe dhridamami sukhasanam, comma. Pankajadhyamapi va bhavatparaha. Brahmacharya dhridatadibhiryamaihi aplavadi niyamaischa bhavitaha. Kurmahe dhridamami sukhasanam. Pankajadhyamapi va bhavatparaha.
ब्रह्मचर्य दृढतादिभिर्यमैः आप्लवादिनियमैश्च पाविताः कुर्महे दृढममी सुखासनं पङ्कजाद्यमपि वा भवत्पराः ब्रह्मचर्य दृढतादिभिर्यमैः आप्लवादिनियमैश्च पाविताः कुर्महे दृढममी सुखासनं पङ्कजाद्यमपि वा भवत्पराः
ब्रह्मचर्य दृढतादिभिर्यमैः आप्लवादिनियमैश्च पाविताः कूर्महे दृढममी सुखासनं पङ्कजाद्यमपि वा भवत्पराः ब्रह्मचर्य दृढतादिभिर्यमैः आप्लवादि नियमैश्च पाविताः कूर्महे दृढममी सुखासनं पङ्कजाद्यमपि वा भवत्पराः.
Answer 3. तारमन्तरनुचिन्त्य सन्ततं प्राणवायुमभियम्य निर्मलाः इन्द्रियाणि विषया ततापहृत्यास्महे भवदुपासनोन्मुखाः. Actually, here is where the pranayama is getting introduced. Anyway said that meaning. So the previous stanza talked about yama, niyama, asana. This stanza is talking about pranayama. So that completes your foundational blocks. Once you have all of these blocks, then comes the most important one called as pratyahara. So the pratyahara is saying, okay, I control my body. How do I now control my external senses, right? Which is the most difficult thing, because you sit in your puja room to pray. Like I always give this example, somebody is cooking, you know exactly what they are cooking, and you can tell, you know, something is wrong with this cooking. We are experts at that. So your sense, we have no control over our senses because our senses wander so easily, right? So whether it be your nose sense or whether it even be your skin, right? So you're sitting and then you feel the temperature is too cold, temperature is too hot. I'm not able to focus on my prayers. I'm not able to do all of these things, right? That means you don't have your senses under control. So he says the main thing before you go to the next one, which comes the next one, is you have pranayama, you get your breath under control. Then you have to get your external senses, because the senses, you can control it if you want, right? You can avoid, you know, how to do this. But the most important thing is not to ignore it. So you cannot say, you know, like, I can smell that sambar cooking, but I'm going to ignore it, right? But that you cannot happen, because what will happen is that smell will continue to linger. See, you should not get distracted by those things. You should have complete control over it. So you should not get distracted by it. So that is the kind of level of perfection you have to reach on this pratyahara, which is control over your senses. So this pranayama and pratyahara are in this. So because he says, then he says, I'll be ready for doing your upasana. By doing this, I'm getting ready to do your upasana, right? So taram antharanu chintya santatam, comma, prana vayum abhiyamya nirmalaha indriyani vishayadadapahrityasmahe. So you can't quite break it, so you have to put a plus, and if you want to break it, it becomes vishayat athapahrityasmahe, but you can't break that further. Tyasmahe bhavadupasanon mukhaha तारमन्तरनु चिन्त्य सन्ततं प्राणवायुमभियम्य निर्मलाः इन्द्रियाणि विषया ततापहृत्यास्महे भवदुपासनोन्मुखाः. Sundari.
तारमन्तरनुचिन्त्य सन्ततं प्राणवायुमभियम्य निर्मलाः इन्द्रियाणि विषयादथापहृत् यास्महे भवदुपासनोन्मुखाः तारमन्तरनुचिन्त्य सन्ततं प्राणवायुमभियम्य निर्मलाः इन्द्रियाणि विषयादथापहृत् यास्महे भवदुपासनोन्मुखाः.
तारमन्तरनु चिन्त्य सन्ततं प्राणवायुमभियम्य निर्मलाः इन्द्रियाणि विषया तथा प्रहृत्यास्महे भवदुपासनोन्मुखाः तारमन्तरनु चिन्त्य सन्ततं प्राणवायुमभियम्य निर्मलाः इन्द्रियाणि विषया तथा प्रहृत्यास्महे भवदुपासनोन्मुखाः.
We'll switch halfway. I think I had Lata and Radha, right? Yeah. Stanza 4. अस्फुटे वपुषिते प्रयत्नथो धारयेम दिशनां मुहुर्मुहुः तेन भक्तिरसमन्तराद्रताम् उद्वहेम भवदङ्घ्रिचिन्तकाः. So the next one comes as the fifth one, which is dharana. So dharana continues for a couple of stanzas, so I'll kind of mix it and say. So now you cleansed yourself, right? Internally, externally, all that. You now got your breath under control with pranayama. You got your asana under control doing that, right? Your body. then you are able to control your external senses. Whatever sensory functions you have, you got it under control. So next you kind of go one level inside. So what comes next is your mind, right? So while you may control all the senses and you will not smell the sambar that's getting cooked, but your mind will still wander, right? Because that is the most difficult thing to control, is controlling the mind, because that can travel anywhere it wants. It can think about anything it wants. So it's very difficult to control the mind. So in this dharana, and there's a difference between this. I'm going to jump a little bit ahead to explain it as well. This dharana and dhyana, there is a subtle difference in it. So this dharana is, think of it as the process of focusing your mind on something, okay? And dhyana is the state you reach once you've got that thing done, right? And the simplest example you can find is when you're a wildlife photographer, right? And you go into the forest, you see an animal running, you take your camera and you keep following that animal all the way. The animal is still in your focus. But you are not letting the camera sit and the animal is not. So the animal is moving and you are also moving your camera. So you're continuing to focus on the animal which is moving, and you're also moving, but you still have it in frame. That is kind of dharana. So you're meditating, you're consciously thinking of something when you're doing that meditation. That is dharana. The dhyana state is, it's fixed. The camera is sitting there, the animal is also not moving, it is fixed, it's locked, right? So you're not consciously doing a process. So that is that state of dhyana that's going to come. So before dhyana comes, the dharana has to happen. So in this dharana, like we said, you have to start thinking about something. Now you can think about anything you want. There is no hard and fast rule, really, right? Some people will say, think about the light, right? People say, think what about anything you want. But of course, in this, and this will also come, I think, later on, I think in 96 or 99, I forget which one. Well, Krishna gives the advice to Uddhava of how to meditate, how to do this process of dharana. So in that process of dharana, he'll say, you have to sit and all the mandatory things. And then he says, you have to visualize the Lord at the tip of your nose. And the Lord's size has to be such that you should, as she says, you first start with imagining my full form with Chaturbhujam, very small size. The size has to be such that it can enter your nostril. That's how the size should be. Then you imagine that form of the Lord at the tip of your nose, and then you start visualizing him. And when you start visualizing him, first you start with the full body, because it's easy for us, right? You can imagine him. You first think of the fun. Even Bhattacharya says it's not going to be easy, but he says you imagine some form of the Lord, and you imagine the full form of the Lord. When you zoom out, we all can think of the Lord very easily. Then he says you have to start zooming in. You start looking at my feet, you start looking at my hands, you start looking at my chest, you start looking at my face, you start zooming in and focusing on each of my body parts. And then finally, you settle down on just my face and not any other body part of mine, right? So he kind of goes through a series of steps here. Anyway, so here all kind of summarized to say that you have to do this process of dharana, which is the process of meditation. And you do this process of meditation by thinking about that Lord, and you think about, first, it's not going to be easy. It is going to be very hard, and it's not going to be clear. Your mind is going to waver. That's why you have to get the mind under control. That's why that pratyahara step was there before. So your mind doesn't waver. And then you start making it more and more crystal form of the Lord, visual, which is what is happening in, I think, stanzas 4 and 5, where each of the limbs of the Lord are very clear and very beautiful, and you're able to visualize that. Okay, so let's continue. So aspute vapushi te prayatnato, dharayema dishanam muhur muhuhu tena bhakti rasam antarardratam. So you can break it that ma if you want. Rasam antarardratam, the mu that is there, you put a im there, Next word starts with the u. Udvahema bhavadangri chintakaha. Aspute vapushite prayatnato dharayema dishanam muhurmuhuhu tena bhakti rasamantaraddratam udvahema bhavadangri chintakaha.
Aspute vapushite prayatnato dharayema dishanam muhurmuhuhu तेन भक्तिरसमन्तरार्द्रताम् उद्वहेम भवदङ्घ्रिचिन्तकाः हस्फुटे वपुषि ते प्रयत्नतो धारयेम दिशनां मुहुर्मुहुः तेन भक्तिरसमन्तरार्द्रताम् उद्वहेम भवदङ्घ्रिचिन्तकाः
अस्फुटेव पुषितो प्रयत्नतो धारयेम दिशिनां मुहुर्मुहुः तेन भक्तिरसमन्तरार्दताम् उद्वहेम भवदङ्घ्रिचिन्तकाः अस्फुटेव पुषितो प्रयत्नतो
वपुषिते प्रयत्नतो
अस्फुटेव पुषिते प्रयत्नतो धारयेम दिशनां मुहुर्मुहुः तेन भक्तिरसमन्तरार्दताम् उद्वहेम भवदङ्घ्रिचिन्तकाः
विस्फुटा वयव भेद सुंदरम त्वद्वपुः पुट is त्वद्वपुस् सुचिर शीलनावशात् अश्रमं मनसि चिन्तयामहे ध्यान योग निरतास्त्वदाश्रयाः. So this again, like I already explained this meaning. So it says once I reach this in the dharana stage itself, the end point of the dharana stage, so you know you are ready for the dhyana stage, is ashramam, without any problem, without even putting effort. If you can sit, just close your eyes and you can visualize the form of the Lord very clearly in your mind, without your senses wavering, without your mind wavering, then you passed that level, right? He says, so that's the point I want to reach, where ashramam, I'll be able to think about you all the time. Then I'm ready for the next step of the dhyana part of the Ashtanga Yoga. Visputha vayava bheda sundaram, tvad vapuhu, put is tvad vapus suchira sheelanavashat ashramam manasi chintayamahe, dhyana yoga nirathas twadashrayaha. Visphuta vayava bheda sundaram twadvapus suchira sheelanavashat ashramam manasi chintayamahe dhyana yoga nirathas twadashrayaha.
विस्फुटा वयवभेदसुन्दरं त्वद्वपुः सुचिरशीलनावशात् आश्रमं मनसि चिन्तयामहे ध्यानयोगनिरतास्त्वदाश्रयाः विस्फुटा वयवभेदसुन्दरं त्वद्वपुः सुचिरशीलनावशात् आश्रमं मनसि चिन्तयामहे ध्यानयोगनिरतास्त्वदाश्रयाः
विस्फुटावयवभेदसुन्दरं त्वद्वपुः सुचिरशीलनावशात् अश्रमं मनसि चिन्तयामहे ध्यानयोगनिरतास्त्वदाश्रयाः विस्फुटावयवभेदसुन्दरं त्वद्वपुः सुचिरशीलनावशात् आश्रमं मनसि चिन्तयामहे ध्यानयोगनिरतास्त्वदाश्रयाः.
Stanza 6. ध्यायतां सकलमूर्तिमीदृशीम् उन्मिषन्मधुरताहृतात्मनां सान्द्रमोदरसरूपमान्तरं ब्रह्मरूपमयि ते भासते. So this one, again, it comes later on when the instructions Krishna gives to Uddhava, right? So the form it says is you have to imagine a lotus in your heart in which the Bhagavan is standing in your final state of this dharana, standing, and you should imagine the entire 14 worlds inside his form. That's called the Virat Swarupam, which we're going to cover in the 6th Dasakam as to what that form of. That is the final state of meditation to get to that point. But he says, imagine that. So all of that you do, with the ashramam, you're able to think of it. So next to go to the dhyana, he says, it's the state, like I said. And in that state, you cannot be consciously thinking, right? Because in the dharana, like I said, you have the flexibility to think, to look at the Lord's face. Okay, I want to look at his hands. I want to look at his feet. I want to look at his full body. You can do whatever you want, but you're focusing on that. in the dhyana, like I said, it's a state you reach where you don't think about anything. So he says, at that point, I'm going to think about Brahma Rupamai. I'm going to think about your Nirguna form, which doesn't have any shape, which doesn't have any form. So that is the state of dhyana, the state in which you are, where you're not thinking about anything, right? Consciously or unconsciously, in either way, you're not thinking about anything. So that is not quite samadhi yet, right? It is the state of dhyana. So that is a state of dhyana you have to reach, because then he'll tell what needs to happen after that. So that's the state. I'll say eventually by doing this, I'll capacity dharana, then I'm going to get to the form of yours where I'm not thinking about, I'm going to think about the nirguna form of yours and not think about anything. And that's the state of dhyana that I will actually reach. And says when the yogis reach that state, that's when they get the supreme happiness. They start feeling it inside of themselves. And then you'll start getting more control, which we'll see what happens. Dhyayatam sakala murtim idrishim. So put a im there, comma. Next word starts with the u. Unmishan madurata hritatmanam sandra moda rasa rupam antaram, comma. Brahma rupamai teva bhasate. Dhyayatam sakalamurtim hidrishim Unmishan madhurata hritatmanam sandramodara rupamantaram brahma rupamayiteva bhasate.
ध्यायतां सकलमूर्तिमीदृशीम् उन्मिषन् मधुरताहृतात्मनां सान्द्रमोदरसरूपमातरं ब्रह्मरूपमयितेव भासते ध्यायतां सकलमूर्तिमीदृशीम् उन्मिषन् मधुरताहृतात्मनां सान्द्रमोदरसरूपमान्तरं ब्रह्मरूपमयितेव भासते
ध्यायतां सकलमूर्तिमीदृशीम् उन्मिषन्मधुरताहृतात्मनां सान्द्रमोदरसरूपमान्तरं ब्रह्मरूपमयितेव भासते ध्यायतां सकलमूर्तिमीदृशीम् उन्मिषन्मधुरताहृतात्मनां सान्द्रमोदरसरूपमान्तरं ब्रह्मरूपमयितेव भासते.
That's 7. Tatsamaswadana rupiniim sthitim tvatsamadhimayi vishwanayaka ashritah punaratah parichyutau arabhe mahicha dharanadikam. So this state of dhyana, once you reach, so this is kind of where you can still slip and fall from this place. So when we say Vishwamitra was in dhyana and then somebody came and disturbed him, right? So because that's where your mind you can still slip from this phase. It can happen due to several reasons. One of them, it says, is sometimes your body will go into a state of sleep without your knowledge. So that means you're not in the proper dhyana because you're not quite in the sleep stage in the dhyana situation, right? And the second thing also which they say you should avoid is the sense of happiness that you get, the bliss that you get when you reach the dhyana stage. You cannot be in a sense of enjoyment of that bliss state, because the moment you are in a state of enjoyment of the bliss state, that means you don't have your senses under control, right? So while you will feel happy, you should be ignorant. You should not worry about it, right? That's a state you have to reach. So anyway, he says, if I get distracted from this dhyana, I'll have to drop back one level, go perfect my dharana and other things, and then come back to the dhyana, right? You cannot say, I'm going to try again. Once you slip, that means your foundation is not strong. That means you have to go back and you have to get your foundation strengthened up and again come back to the state of the dharana. Then you again reach dhyana, and then samadhi is the final state you reach where it is under your control, right? And what you do when you have under control, it starts coming from the next stanza. But that is when people say this person has attained samadhi. That means they are not doing dhyana for 1 hour. The state of dhyana which we define, it's not like they're doing it for 1 hour or 2 hours. It is for permanent. It's up to them, because they can decide what they want to do after that, which comes next, but it is up to their control how long they want to do that state of dhyana. So when you reach that point of control of your dhyana, then you are in a state of samadhi, because you could technically not wake up if you don't want to. You can be in that state of dhyana forever, right? That's the state of samadhi. But in the state of samadhi itself, they're going to have choices, which is going to come next. So tat samaswadana rupinim stithim, comma, tvat samadhimayi vishwanayaka ashritaha, put a F, ashritav punarataha, put a F again, punaratav parichyutau. So that va that you have after the tha, parichyuta va, you're going to break it, put parichyutau, comma. Next word becomes a, arabhemahi cha dharanadikam. Tatsamasvadana rupinim stithim tvatsamadhimayi vishwanayaka ashritah punaratah parichyutau arabhemahi cha dharanadikam.
तत्समास्वदनरूपिणीं स्थितिं त्वत्समाधिमयि विश्वनायक आश्रिताः पुनरतः परिच्युतौ आरभेमहि च धारणादिकम् तत्समास्वदनरूपिणीं स्थितिं त्वत्समाधिमयि विश्वनायक आश्रिताः पुनरतः परिच्युतौ आरभेमहि च धारणादिकम्
तत्समास्वदनरूपिणीं स्थितिं त्वत्समाधिमयि विश्वनायक आश्रितः पुनरतः परिच्युतौ आरभेमहि च धारणाधिकम् तत्समास्वदनरूपिणीं स्थितिं त्वत्समाधिमयि विश्वनायक आश्रिताः पुनरतः परिच्युतौ आरभेमहि च धारणाधिकम्
इत्तमभ्यसन निर्भरोल्लसत्वत्परात्मसुखकल्पितोत्सवाः मुक्तभक्तकुलमौलितां गताः संचरेम शुकनारदादिवत्. So once you reach that level of state, it says now you are technically liberated, although your body is still there, your soul is still there. So liberation itself, there are two ways you can define it. One, liberation of merging with the Lord once your soul leaves the body, which we're going to see later. But you are in a kind of state of liberation because you don't have any attachments, you don't have any of those aspects. So he says, like Shuka and Narada and everybody else, I can move around freely because I don't have any more attachments. You will not have any of those things. You are kind of almost liberated. You just have not left your body, right? That is the state you will actually reach. And yeah, so that pretty much, and with that results itself in a state of bliss. So all this Mahapariva, everybody who's in a state of who have reached the end point towards the end of their lives, right? So they reach a state of liberation where they're still there, but then they are not having any of these attachments. So ittam abhyasana, this word I can't quite break it, so I have to kind of say it together. So ittam abhyasana nirbharolasat, it, and then put a plus, tvat paratma sukha kalpitotsavaha. So those flows together. Mukta bhakta kula maulitam gataha, comma, sancharema shuka naradadivat. Ittamabhyasana nirbharollasattvat paratma sukha kalpitotsavaha mukta bhakta kula maulitam gataha sancharema shuka naradadivat.
इत्थमभ्यसन निर्भरोल्लसत्वत्परात्मसुख कल्पितोत्सवाः मुक्तभक्तकुलमौलितां गताः संचरेम शुकनारदादिवत् इत्थमभ्यसन निर्भरोल्लसत्वत्
And the nirbharolasat is kind of halfway mark.
Okay. Nirbharolasatvat sukhakalpitotsavaha muktabhaktakula-maulitam gataha sancharema shukana narada-divat.
इत्थमभ्यसन निर्भरोल्लसत्वत्परात्मसुखकल्पितोत्सवाः मुक्तभक्तकुलमौलितां गताः सञ्चरेम सुखनारदादिवत्. इत्थमभ्यसन निर्भरोल्लसत्वत्परात्मसुखकल्पितोत्सवाः मुक्तभक्तकुलमौलितां गताः सञ्चरेम सुखनारदादिवत्.
That last word, Radha Guru, Shuka, Sha, okay. Shukana.
Shukanarada. Okay.
Stanza 9. Tvatsamadhi vijaye tu yaf punaha mangshu moksha rasikah kramhena va yoga vashyamanilam shadashrayaihi unnayat yaja sushumna yashanaihi. So now you will have, see, up to this, whatever you have to do it. You don't have much of a choice, right? From now you'll have some choices, because now you got your breath under control, you have all of this, you reach that state of samadhi, right? You have full control now. Says now you, like I said, you're kind of liberated, but you have to decide when you want to get liberated and how you want to get liberated. There are some choices, but before we go to that in the 10th stanza, the first step to do that is, you all know this Ida, Pingala, Sushumna, Nadi, the 7 chakras that are there and everything, right? So he says, once you reach that point, you have to move your pranavayu from the Mooladhara chakra, which is there at the bottom, 6 chakras up. And there's an Agneya chakra, which is there between your eyes. And then there is a Sahasrara chakra, which is on the very top or the crown of your head. So he says, step 1 is to move your pranavayu up along the Sushumna Nadi, which goes straight up along the back, and bring and rest your pranavayu between your eyes first, right? And then it's going to continue next. So we'll pause here in this stanza. So, but you get that eventually by getting your breath under control, by getting all of this, by getting into the state of samadhi. It says you will then be able to do this. Without going through all of this process, you will not be able to do any of this stuff. So that's when people who are attaining the state of samadhi, they're still alive, right? Think of it this way. When somebody says, I've attained samadhi, so what people do, they say, okay, the person has not left the world yet, right? And we build something, we build a temple around it, but they're still alive, right? Because they can decide at what point the soul has to leave the body. So that's what this is going to talk about when you reach the state of samadhi. But to that, and whenever they decide, they have to bring the pranavayu along the Sushumna Nadi through the 6 chakras and bring it and pause it at the Agneya chakra first, right? So Tvat Samadhi Vijaye tu Yaf, Yaha is there, put a F, Yaf Punaha, put a Visarga comma. Next word is a Ir, you remove that. Mangshu Moksha Rasikaha, put a Ich sound, Rasikah Kramena Va. Yoga Vashyamanilam Shadashrayaihi. So the Ru that you have, we're going to remove it, put a Visarga first, Shadashrayaihi, comma. Next word starts with the U. Unnayat Yaja Sushumnaya Shanaihi. Sushumnaya, Sushumna Nadi. So Sushumnaya Shanaihi. Tvatsamadhi Vijaye tu yaf punaha Mangshu Moksha Rasikah Kramhena Va. Yoga Vashyamanilam Shadashrayaihi Unnayat Yaja Sushumnaya Shanaihi.
Tvatsamadhi vijayetu yah punah Mangshu moksha rasikah kramena va Yoga vashyamanilam shadashrayaihi Unnayat yaja sushumna yashanaihi. Tvatsamadhi vijayetu yah punah Mangshu moksha rasikah kramena va Yoga vashyamanilam shadashrayaihi Unnayat yaja sushumna yashanaihi.
Tvatsamadhi vijayetu yah punaha Mangshu moksha rasikah kramena va Yoga vasyamanilam shadashrayaihi Unnayatyaju sushumna yashanaihi. Tvatsamadhi vijayetu yah punaha Mangshu moksha rasikah kramena va Yoga vasyamanilam shadashrayaihi Unnayatyaja sushumna yashanaihi.
Stanza 10. Lingadehamapi santyajannato liyate tvai pare niragraha ऊर्ध्वलोककुतुकीतुमूर्धतः सार्धमेव करणैर्निरीयते. So now you reach that state of samadhi, like we said, and you've decided that I want to get liberated now, right? So you want to leave this earth, right? And your soul has to leave the body right now. So the soul, it cannot travel on its own without a carrier. It has to have some carrier. So when it is here in this earth, it has this sthula shariram that we have, which is the gross body, which has got its bones and skins and muscles and blood and all of that stuff. That is the sthula shariram. But when it leaves the body, it still has to have a carrier. That's called as a sukshma shariram. So that will not have your what do you call, skin and blood and all of that stuff, but it has a couple of koshas. It's got a couple of sheaths. So it has the ability to still sense. It's got the sense of, it can even perform actions. So it's got the ability to perform actions. It's got the ability to perceive things. It's got the senses as well, and it's got a couple of other manas, buddhi, and all of those are still there. But it doesn't have the gross body that we have, right? So, like we said, you bring your pranavayu to the Agneya chakra, and then you decide, do I want to get liberated immediately and go merge with the Supreme Lord right away? Or there are like 14 worlds, and we'll see some of those worlds later on in the Dasakams, right? So do I want to go to those higher worlds where other demigods are there, where all the rishis are there, and there are you essentially you'll have ashta siddhi powers once you go there. So you have that option. So you'll have two options to decide. If you decide that I want to completely just go merge with the Lord, then the soul has to exit through your Agneya chakra, not through the Sahasrara chakra. If you decide that I want to actually go through the other worlds and I want to go and be in Brahmaloka, Satyaloka, and we'll see how it will travel when you go through that. So that is called as Krama Mukti, Krama liberation, in which case it goes through the Brahmarandra, it goes through the Sahasrara chakra at the very top. It breaks open to the crown of your head and leaves. So that means you still are not going and merging with the Lord instantly. You're going to go through a few things which we're going to see. And for majority, so primarily, when these rishis, when they do this samadhi, they cover their bottom. There are places through which the soul can exit, right? So they cover their bottom with their foot, and then they have to make sure it doesn't exit through your eyes or your nose or your ears or your mouth. For most common people, it ends up leaving through your mouth. So, but that is the control they reach, where they bring the pranavayu to the middle and it has to exit through that, either through the top or through the middle of the eyes, right? So at that point, you get liberated. Technically, you are now liberated. And like we said, you have two liberations possible. One is Krama Mukti, where it goes through the top. And then you have the Videha Mukti, which means you're immediately merging, in which case it goes to the middle of the eyes, right? So that's what it's talking about here. It says when it goes through the Agneya chakra, you then give up your subtle body and then you go merge with the Lord. If you do the Videha Mukti, you get a subtle body and then you eventually go to Brahmaloka, but there are steps before you go to Brahmaloka, which is going to come later. So Linga Dehamapi Santya Jannato, Liyate Tvai Pare Niragraha Urdhva Loka Kutuki tu Murdhataha, Sardhameva Karanair Niriyate. Lingadehamapi Santya Jannatho Liyate Tvai Pare Niragraha Urdhva Loka Kutuki tu Murdhataha Sardhameva Karanair Niriyate.
लिङ्गदेहमपि सन्त्यजन्नतो लीयते त्वयि परे निराग्रहः ऊर्ध्वलोककुतुकी तु मूर्धतः सार्धमेव करणैर्निरीयते लिङ्गदेहमपि सन्त्यजन्नतो लीयते त्वयि परे निराग्रहः ऊर्ध्वलोककुतुकी तु मूर्धतः सार्धमेव करणैर्निरीयते
लिङ्गदेहमपि सन्त्यजन्मतो लीयते त्वयि परे निराग्रहः ऊर्ध्वलोककुतिकीतुमूर्धतः सार्धमेव करणैर्निरीयते.
Radhagaru, first line, Santya Jannato, in and na.
Santya Jannato, okay. लिङ्गदेहमपि सन्त्यजन्नथो लीयते त्वयि परे निराग्रहः ऊर्ध्वलोककुतिकीतुमूर्धतः सार्धमेव करणैर्निरीयते.
Okay, we'll stop here. So the next, because the next set of stanzas is when you do this Vide Krama Mukti, where it goes through the Sahasrara Chakra, what journey it flows before it eventually goes and merges and you attain the Siddhi. Right, so we'll cover that in the next class. सान्ध्रानन्दावबोधात्मकमनुपमितं कालदेशावधिभ्यां निर्मुक्तं नित्यमुक्तं निगमशतसहस्रेण निर्भास्यमानम् अस्पष्टं दृष्टमात्रे पुनरुरुपुरुषार्थात्मकं ब्रह्मतत्त्वं तत्तावद्भाति साक्षात् गुरुपवनपुरे हन्त भाग्यं जनानाम् कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. Thank you everyone. See you next class.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Bye everyone.